We good? All right, guys, how's it going? How was lunch? Yeah, enthusiastic about lunch. So this is my first time that I've spoken twice at a con, and both talks were in the same day. So that was this has been fun. I gave a talk earlier this morning, and I was talking at the same time as Grifter, and so my room was almost empty, which is fine. Like calms the nerves a little bit, right? I really enjoy. I gave a talk about defensive OSINT tactics this morning, and it was a lot of fun. But tell you the truth, I'm most excited about this talk because it's a topic that is not addressed enough in tech in general, but especially within information security. And my goal with this is to kind of raise awareness about the problem, and we'll get into that a little bit later. For those of you who don't know me, I am Ethan Dodge. I'm originally from here in Utah. However, I currently live in the Bay Area. I work for a healthcare startup in San Francisco called Nuna Health. I do forensics and incident response for them. I'm always up for learning something new. Especially when it comes to something in tech. However, as you'll see in this talk, I have kind of taken a favorite in I've started to study culture a lot, and it's fascinating to me. That's my Twitter handle __ETH0, 2 underscores, and then my blog is egd.io. And then just a quick plug for my employer, real quick. We're a data warehousing company for healthcare insurance, and we as you can imagine with healthcare data, security is extremely important to us. Our security team is a big chunk of the company. There's about 120 of us, and there's 10 of us on the security team, and we are actually hiring a senior security engineer. If any of you guys are interested, come talk to me. We are also hiring software engineers as well, if any of you guys are interested. So, all right, imposter syndrome. How many of you guys are familiar with the term imposter syndrome? Okay, because I had actually never heard the term. I was familiar with the symptoms and whatnot, but I had never actually heard the official term until a few months ago, actually just like weeks before I submitted this talk. So let's talk a little bit about what it is. But first off, why am I spelling imposter OR instead of ER? How many of you guys think it should be OR? How many of you guys think it should be ER? Okay, ER is most common, but actually if you look it up in the dictionary, it is OR, but both are acceptable. I thought that was interesting. I literally on dictionary, it was Merriam-Webster.com. If you type in imposter with an ER, it'll take you to the entry with OR. I thought that was very interesting. But both are correct, so I just decided to go with OR. So, as I said, my goal with this talk is I want to start a conversation and raise awareness about this problem that is that's in our industry that's not often addressed. I am by no means a therapist or a social worker or anything like that, so please don't take what I say as such. I just have strong opinions about the subject. And I'm going to speak very openly and candidly, and I would like to start to have a discussion with all of you guys here, if you guys would be willing to participate. And if any of you guys are open to speak openly, if any of you guys are willing to speak openly as well, that'd be awesome. And if we go short, that's fine too. I'm not too worried about that. So, imposter syndrome. You don't feel obligated to answer these questions if you don't want to, but ever feel like a fraud, or like you're undeserving of success, or like you'll never compare to the skill level or knowledge of a coworker? I've felt all of these things. Imposter syndrome, according to Wikipedia, refers to high-achieving individuals marked by an inability to internalize their accomplishments and a persistent fear of being exposed as a fraud. So the basic idea is you've had a certain amount of success, and while you may at one time feel that you deserve that success, the events may happen to make you feel like, oh, maybe I really don't deserve this job that I have, right? Or maybe I don't deserve this award or to speak at this conference because I'm not as knowledgeable or as elite as this other person. That pretty much sums it all up. How many of you guys saw this tweet? Went out about like 4 months ago or so. Anybody see this when it went out? No? That surprises me. Okay. Anybody know who Jessica Barber is? She's fairly influential in the InfoSec industry. Her background is actually in sociology, but she's appeared on several news outlets as a cybersecurity expert. And she got curious and she conducted a poll on Twitter and got over 800 responses. And the question was, how often do you feel imposter syndrome? The feeling of being a fraud. And there were 4 options, and I'm censoring them here because I want to see what you guys think. And I'll reveal them here in a second. The options were all the time, daily, often, weekly, sometimes, monthly, or never, right? Those were the 4 options. So all the time, often, sometimes, never. How many of you guys think the largest answer was all the time? Okay. How many of you guys think it was often? Okay. Sometimes? Never? Okay. It was really, really close between all the time and often. And keep in mind, this was just a Twitter poll. This is by no means official or should be considered as, I don't know. I don't mean to downplay what she's doing here because I think it's great, but it's not like she did a ton of research into this. However, she did go on to give an incredibly good talk at Saintcon about imposter syndrome, and this tweet, this was actually the first time I had ever heard of imposter syndrome, and it was very impactful to me, and it was this tweet that inspired this talk. How many of you do the poll results surprise? Do those results surprise anybody in here? Yeah? Why so? If anyone's willing to answer. I'm sorry?
Daily seems like a lot.
Daily seems like a lot? Okay. I agree. Anyone else? I saw this after the poll had closed. But I would have been on the fence between often and daily, personally. She also got tons of responses, literally hundreds of responses. Most of them were, the overwhelming majority of which were positive. And I just want to go through a few of those responses before we kind of open it up for discussion here. I really liked this. I think one reason it's common is you have so many sub-disciplines and brilliant people in each to make one feel smaller. How many of you guys have experienced that? Like you discover this whole new subset of InfoSec that you maybe never even knew existed. I especially felt this all the time when I really first got in the industry, and you feel like all of a sudden you realize how much you don't know, right? It's sobering, right? Or there was this response, I feel we are expected to know so much about so many areas. I think the doubt sets in when you meet a specialist in one. It's interesting. So previously, before I was at Nuna, I worked for Adobe here in Utah. And I worked with some incredibly smart people, some of which are here in the room. And I don't know if I can say constantly, but I often felt like I would never live up to their skill. I'm going to specifically call out Bryce Coons, not because he never, ever put me down, but That dude is so freaking smart. I don't know if any of you guys know Bryce. He's actually giving a talk here today. Is he in the room? No? Okay. He's an awesome guy, one of my favorite people, one of my favorite coworkers I've ever had, but the dude, like, he'll whip out Metasploit exploits in like 10 minutes. You know, it's like I was an analyst at Adobe, and he was pwning all these boxes, and I wasn't able to catch them. Right? It was very, very, very discouraging. And he's very much a specialist in penetration testing, and I am not. My background is in incident response and forensics, right? So it gets a little discouraging. Ben Hughes, he's fairly well known. We're going to talk about a blog post that he wrote a little bit later in the talk, but he wrote, "It gets worse when I go to cons and see Mad O Day, but now and then I realize that isn't what I do, and I seem to be okay at it." I think the last sentence that he said right there, the last bit of that, is very important. He talked about keeping perspective. That's not what I do. I'm not paid to find 0 days in software, right? And so I can't. It's not fair to myself to compare me to people that are having success in that area when I don't even do that, right? We're going to talk about perspective here in a little bit, but how many of you guys have gone to a con and seen some crazy cool tool released, or some crazy vulnerability, like when they hacked the Jeep, you know, and they were talking all about that, and like thought like, oh my gosh, like these guys are incredible, and I don't know, am I the only one that compares myself to other people? No, I'm definitely not. That's why I'm having this talk, right? So yeah, see, there's my imposter syndrome coming out right there. I really like this one too. He said last month I won a national award for security that only exacerbated that imposter feeling by a ton. I thought that was very interesting. Has anyone ever had an experience like that you're willing to admit? It's interesting how recognition made his feel, instead of making it better, it actually reinforced his feelings of not deserving his success. How many people in the room don't have a technical degree, or don't have a degree at all? I do have a technical degree, so I should put my hand down. But I know that this is a problem. That how many of you guys have felt like this person? I have a fine art degree, ended up finding and blogging about sec threats full time. It's kind of weird, right? It's very interesting. My wife, I hope she doesn't mind me sharing this because I did not consult her, but she has a humanities degree. Her background is in linguistics, and she's currently pivoting to computer science. She's a software developer, and she often feels like this, that it's kind of like the elephant in the room, that she doesn't necessarily have as technical a background as everyone else, and to me, I always just say, who cares? You know, it doesn't matter as long as you can do your job, right? She did get some responses from people saying that they've never struggled with it, which is fine and awesome. I mean, that means that person has a healthy self-esteem, not that people that do struggle with it don't have healthy self-esteem. But I think it's really important to raise awareness of the problem among both populations, not just those who struggle with it and those, but also those who don't struggle with it. But that way we can help each other. I really, really enjoyed this response as well. He talked about that he experiences it daily, and she asked him what makes it better. And he specifically called out supporting work colleagues. I think that is incredibly important, and we're going to talk about that later on, but empathy is a hard attribute to have for some people, and in general. But if you can have a supporting work environment, and your coworkers understand your hesitations and your background and support you when you admit that you don't know something. That is huge. And I think it is all of our responsibilities to create such an environment in our workplaces. I think that is one of the biggest problems as to why this, the biggest factors as to why this is such a big problem, is that we need to have a little more empathy. Again, I've done zero research on this. This is just totally based off of my own observations, right? I liked what this guy said. He said, one comfort is that those who I look up to in the industry do the same, meaning that they also struggle with it. And it's true. She got responses from Jack Daniel. Anyone know who Jack Daniel is? He was the keynote speaker at B-Side Salt Lake City. Also, Javed Malik, I'm sorry if I just butchered his name, but I saw this guy speak at B-Side San Francisco about how to become the InfoSec professional, and it was an amazing talk. It was super great. It was standing room only, and he, as you could see here, he admits that he struggles with it, as in his own words, every damn day, right? So you're definitely in good company if you struggle with these things. Albert Einstein, this is a famous quote from him, that where he admits that he has also struggled with feelings of that he's not good enough or undeserving. And I mean, Albert Einstein changed the world in many ways, right? How many of you guys have read or heard of this book, Daring Greatly? I just saw one hand. Anyone else back there? So I read this book in preparation for this talk, and when I finished it, I read it again because it impacted me so much. And I would highly, highly recommend it, especially for anyone. It has helped me understand why I feel many of the feelings that I feel, and it has also helped me have more empathy towards those that also struggle with similar feelings. It's made me realize that everyone's just doing their best, right? And that's all that we can really ask for. I'll relate a quick story that she shares in there. She talks about the concept of these minions, or was it minions? Gremlins. It was gremlins. What are the gremlins saying? That's a phrase that she uses often when she thinks that she's not good enough at, and which is, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Brene Brown, but she is an extremely well-known social worker. She has had several TED Talks that have gone viral, and one of them is one of the most watched TED Talks in the world. Anyway, when she has feelings that she is not good enough, she often asks herself, well, what are the gremlins saying? And she talks it out with either her husband or a good friend. And as she talks about what the feelings that she's having of inadequacy, she can then realize that no, that is not my thinking. That is self-doubt, and she's able to push that aside more easily. And that's a tactic that I have since put in practice, and it's been and it's worked well for me. But I would highly, highly recommend this book. This book has so much impacted me that it will be a book that I read regularly for the rest of my life. She has another one that's somewhat of a follow-up to Daring Greatly, and it's called Rising Strong. I would also highly recommend that one. This book also, I'm a parent and a spouse, and it has changed the way that I look at parenting. It has changed the way that I look at my marriage. Changed the way I look at all relationships. I would highly recommend it. In it, she talks a lot about how vulnerability is so difficult, but it's healthy. Vulnerability. What is vulnerability? Anyone care to expound what it means to feel vulnerable? Yes, way back in the back. I'm sorry, can you shout it out?
It gives people information about yourself that puts you in a position where they can potentially hurt you using that information.
Yeah, definitely. How often are we faced with decisions to be or put in vulnerable situations in our industry? I feel like it is all the time. And I definitely think it is the case, especially when we realize we don't know something. We need to realize that it's okay not to know something, and even more importantly, it's okay to admit that you don't know something, right? I think that attitude right there in and of itself will help us so much. The quicker we admit it, the quicker we can learn. Really, that hesitation to admit that we don't know something is just hindering us in our growth, right? As soon as if we can admit that we're wrong, admit that we don't know something, then the quicker somebody can help us learn it, right? So Ben Hughes, he went on to write up a blog article about his feelings and struggles with imposter syndrome, and he talks about he theorizes, again, he's also not a social worker or anything, of why he thinks InfoSec, imposter syndrome is so bad in InfoSec. And he says InfoSec is very ego-based, and he's more referring to that it's a very egotistical culture, especially when you go to conferences, like he said in his previous tweet. It's InfoSec is purely attack and defense. Like, there's a funny quote that I heard at a conference a while back, that pen tests are funny because if they do get in, that means that you suck, but if they don't get in, that means that they suck. Right? I thought that was a interesting quote there, and it illustrates this perfectly, that we kind of like both sides of InfoSec, the defensive and the offensive, are just now kind of coming together and working together in a sense that is actually promotes change, right? And then he also talks about how there's people constantly attacking you. I am on the forensic side of this, and sometimes I have to stop reading about breaches and threat actors and stuff, because I get so down, because I'm like, they are so far ahead of the game than I am. Like, it's scary, right? He tells a story. I'm just going to end on this story, and then we'll open it to a little bit of discussion if anyone wants to. At B-Side San Francisco, he talks about how at the end of it, in 2013, there was a roast. He's British, and so he had to explain to his British audience what a roast is. Anyway, he said, however, this roast wasn't against a person, it was against the InfoSec industry. But it wasn't. It quickly turned into a lot of highly paid men who worked as consultants and pen testers, complaining about report writing, dumb users, finding the same old bug again, literally roasting absolutely everyone and everything bar the actual InfoSec industry. This was the first time I walked out of a conference. That was incredibly impactful to me, because I think it illustrates very nicely how one of the problems with information security, at least the culture, right? The culture is very concentrated on finding the problem and then placing blame, rather than helping the person fix the problem, right? This attitude totally needs to stop. Making yourself vulnerable is scary, because you never know how the person's going to react. If they say, well, I need you to go and see what IP addresses this server's talking to. Well, I don't know how to do that. You don't know how they're going to react. Are they going to say, well, how long have you been doing this and you don't know how to do that, right? Or, okay, fine, then I'll do it. Or are they going to be helpful and say, okay, let's do a pairing session, get some time on my calendar, and I'll show you how to do that, right? Obviously the latter that I just listed, is definitely the prime and ideal reaction. And as I said before, it is all of our responsibilities to respond as such to each other and our coworkers, and only then will we be able to create change here. We need to welcome and embrace vulnerability. That's all I had. I don't know if there's any questions or any comments. I'd love to hear other people's thoughts about this. again, I just kind of wanted to start a discussion, raise awareness, and maybe help make some change. Yeah.
I think one of the fundamental issues too.
I'm sorry, can you use the mic right there? Thank you.
So I think one of the fundamental issues for those of us that are on the blue side of the equation, I guess, is I'm always worried of the CISO, like, are we secure?
Yeah.
Like that question scares the hell out of me.
For
I have
sure.
a pretty good idea of what's going on in my network.
Yeah.
But like, I know I can never say 100% we're good.
Yeah.
Because I don't know about what that zero
Yeah.
day is that came from
Exactly.
where. So it's been hard for me to decouple the industry as a whole will never be secure from I suck.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to, we easily internalize that to be, if I didn't find that hole that one dude found, then I screwed up, versus it's just a really complex industry.
Yeah. And it's intimidating going to a CEO and stating stuff like that, right?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
yeah. Any other thoughts?
I saw a Venn diagram that was like, what all the knowledge that's out there in the world, what you think other people know, and it's like a lot of that circle, and then what you know, right? And it's this little ball. And what you really find is, even amongst really smart people, everyone has their little area, and they overlap or cover. But I mean, I work with Dan, or used to, and we have guys that have been in InfoSec for 20 years, and still you'll hear them like, and they're okay to admit it now, like, I have no idea what this is or what that is. I just think the difficult thing is getting to that point where you realize, like, I have this sphere of knowledge, but it's never going to be all the knowledge in the world, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. That I think, and it is interesting how it becomes easier over time to admit that you don't know something. But anyway, any other thoughts? Yeah. This is awesome. Thanks, guys.
That kind of goes with, I had an epiphany a few years ago while writing employee reviews. If you've ever seen those 4 stages of competence, how you're unconsciously incompetent, you don't know that you know something, then you might be consciously incompetent, you know that there's something you don't know. Then you're consciously competent, there's something that you know how to do, like, I know how to get into this thing, it's a Unix system. And then there's the next stage where you're unconsciously competent, where you know something and you don't even realize it. And I think a lot of us spend a lot of time at the consciously incompetent, where we have all this stuff that we've already learned that's in the background. Like, I know 50 VI hotkeys, but I don't put that on my resume. It's just something that I know that I never think about it. But then there's other problems that I run into that I don't know the problem for. And we spend most of our time running up against problems that we haven't solved yet and trying to bury into those. And so it seems like our world is always focusing on the part that we don't know. So it's easy to admit that we don't know something because there's something that we haven't discovered yet and we're trying to work with it and figure it out. That's what we're all here, is trying to learn new things. But then we don't focus on everything that we already know that we have in the background. And that's what exacerbates our imposter syndrome, because we don't even think about everything that we already know that we can do without even thinking about it. We just
Interesting.
focus on the stuff that we're trying to learn right now.
Interesting. I like that. Thank you. Is my mic still on? Yeah? Okay. We're actually out of time, but thank you so much, guys, for your comments and your thoughts. I think this is an extremely important subject, and I plead with you guys to make the move and put yourself in vulnerable situations. Don't be afraid to admit that you don't know something. And then if you ever see a coworker that is making themselves vulnerable in front of you, have empathy, right? And help them learn. I think small changes like that are eventually going to create the big change within our industry. Thank you so much.